Watch out, let me get a shot. Where they at? Where they at?
Put on that rooftop. Hey! Give me a fucking 42 in the United States!
We're east of the riverbed. And, we're taking fire from the west. Roger, stand by, we're popping smoke. Gun runs north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Welcome to the Combat Leadership Podcast. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Asad Khan. Welcome, my friend. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And for the audience, I just want to let you know we're very privileged to have Asad with us today. I think many of you already know about Asad's background. He is I say a legendary, renowned combat leader, retired as a lieutenant colonel, did great things with his battalion in Afghanistan, truly. And he's agreed to share a lot of his combat experiences and wisdom and insights, of which he has plenty. So, Asad, with that, I can't do an intro that can do you better justice. I would just ask for the audience that doesn't know you, can you give us a little bit of your origin story? Where were you born? You have a great story and all of that. Let us know so the people that don't know you know who's talking to them right now.
Sure, Mike. Before I start, I just want to make one point. You know, that audio clip that you play in the beginning of your podcast, that is a very compelling clip, and I'll tell you why. It's been 20-some years since, I was in Afghanistan for my second combat tour. And the moment I heard it, and I actually had a flashback, and it was so compelling and so real. You know, the anxiety, the intensity, the urgency that goes into that clip is really special. It really is. And as we talked offline, please find out where that clip comes from and share it with everybody. But just going back to my origin story, I mean, everybody knows with a name like Asad, Genghis Khan. I wasn't born in the United States. I happened to be born in Pakistan, and my family immigrated to the U.S. in 1970 due to political turmoil, and we ended up in West Hartford, Connecticut. And my first impression of the United States was it was a land of plenty. And I remember walking into the supermarket, and I still have these vivid memories, walking in a supermarket and the colors that I saw, And a lot of these developing countries, you don't see these colors, right? Everything is gray or white, and it's drab and beige. But when I walked in the supermarket, those colors really hit me. And the amount of choices that people had. So it truly was a land of plenty. So in West Hartford, Connecticut, I was raised in an Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. All my neighbors, everybody around us were Orthodox people of the Jewish faith. And we had cultural and similarities, and also in our diet. Kosher and halal are essentially the same, right? And so it was really a good neighborhood. And, on Friday evening for Shabbat, they would always have me help them out, turn on the light switch, move this, move that, things they couldn't do. And I'd make a little bit of money. They'll give me a quarter here or S&H green stamps, if you remember those.
Oh, yeah.
They would give me those. And, so it was really good. It was a good neighborhood. And then my first day in middle school, I remember, when the teacher called on me to introduce myself, and I stood up. And the teacher was kind of shocked, and the class starts laughing, like, "Who is this clown?" And the teacher basically said, "Hey, we don't do that here. Please sit down." Rather than making it a learning point and saying, it's good to respect your elders, it's good to respect teachers, and this is something good that this immigrant kid has brought. But then nonetheless, so I told my story, and then later on, out in the hallway, some kid shouldered me, and we had wall lockers, and he shouldered me into the wall locker. And I come from, I'm a Pathan, an Afridi. And my first reaction was just, boom. So I smack him in the face, and, I think I busted he's bleeding, so I don't know if I broke his nose or not, but he's down on the ground crying like a little sissy, What I didn't realize was that I was going to get suspended for 3 days, and I got suspended. But the irony of the whole thing was that he's a school bully. And I became everybody's best friend because I knocked out the bully, right? This is like my first day in America, right? Or first day in school, really. So it was pretty interesting. Then after middle school, I ended up going to a boarding school in Avon, Connecticut. And then I went to Babson. Babson is a business school in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And I think I was probably the only person out of Babson that went in the military, and I joined the Marines, and it was great. I loved it. I loved OCS. I thrived on it. I was I'm just gifted in terms of my physical fitness, and I absolutely loved OCS, and I loved IOC. TBS was okay, but IOC I really loved it, right? And then after that, I got orders to 7th Marines. Out in California. So I'm thinking, shit, I'm going to California. It's great. I'll go to California. Awesome. Little did I realize California is not flat. It's full of mountains. And 7th Marines is at San Mateo with, Mount MF, if everybody calls it, the Grim Reaper, all those big mountains around there. So anyway, so I check into 7th Marines, and my regimental commander is Colonel J. Vargas, Medal of Honor recipient. Mm-hmm, and think about this. A second lieutenant walking in to regimental commander, that's a big deal in itself, but a Medal of Honor recipient. Yeah. So the bar just went from here to up there, right? And, and he's really a gentleman, really humble officer and a good officer. He was always out and about checking up on the Marines. And Colonel Vargas is still around. He's 87 years old, and I'm trying to get him on my podcast, and maybe you should reach out to him if you can and invite him on. And so I was sent down to 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. So I check in with the adjutant, I go see the battalion XO, and he tells me be at the pull-up bars at noon to meet the battalion commander. Luckily, I brought my PT gear. So I put on my PT gear, I go to the pull-up bars, and here comes the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Bill Simone, Wild Bill. These are all Vietnam veterans, right? And he takes me on a run. And the rumor control had told us that you don't stay up with the battalion commander, you're going to end up in some staff job. If you want a platoon, you better stay up with them. And, like I said, so I stayed up with them. And I ended up being a platoon commander, got augmented. And back then, augmentation was very, very difficult. And as a result of that, I was one of the 2 officers in the regiment that kept his 03 MOS. Others were, given other MOSs, logistics and whatnot. And after that, I went to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. And again, I thought, hey, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, easy stuff. Little did I know that this was even tougher in my mind than the fleet if you took it seriously. And I ended up doing 15 cycles, and then those mountains that I thought I was leaving behind, I didn't know that the recruits came back to Camp Pendleton and humped those mountains up and down. So I did those, I did Mount MF or the Grim Reaper 15 times. But my, evidently, they say I put through about 5,000 recruits, obviously the drill instructors did, but as a series officer and company commander. But that's not my, what I take pride in. What I really take pride in is that I never lost a drill instructor. And the reason I never lost a drill instructor was because I supervised them without spying on them. And you had to build a trust with the drill instructors that I wasn't just snooping around. I was just there all the time, putting in the hours. And they finally started respecting that when they realized that I wasn't, peeking over windows and stuff and all this happy horse shit. So nonetheless, from the drill field, I went to AWS, did well there, I don't like talking about the stuff, but, distinguished grad and all that stuff. And from AWS, I went to, became a Marine advisor to the Royal Saudi Marine Forces in Saudi Arabia. So, I spent a year with them, and that was a good tour. I enjoyed it. And from there, I got orders back. Now, think about this. I'm coming out of the desert, right, of Saudi Arabia. They gave me orders to 2nd Marines, which was the Marine Corps' cold weather regiment. I had no idea, right? So I come to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, And there, the battalion commander was, and you know him, he's also a Left-Witch recipient, Lieutenant Colonel Denny Halick. Good guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hard dude, right? And I was a company commander, and I'll tell you this much. I'm not boasting. I take great pride in Bravo 1-2. There wasn't a finer infantry unit in the U.S. arsenal at that moment in time in our military, and I can honestly attest to that. These Marines, we focus on live fire all the time, and I'm not talking just going to the range and laying down and plunking rounds. I'm talking about fire movement, fire maneuver, night fire, non-illuminated night attacks, everything. And we believe in physical fitness and toughness. I would be there on the weekends PTing them, because I believed in this stuff, and I was getting them ready for war. And we were so ready that, on that 8-hour notice, we were deployed to Gitmo for the Cuban migrants, crisis that happened, Operation Sea Signal. And then we went to Okinawa. I was, served as an OPSO and the XO in the same battalion. So I absolutely just loved it. I loved 1-2. It was just a phenomenal experience. Good people, good Marines, a good battalion, tough. And from there, I went to the Naval War College. And one day I'm working out, and I had an Army Ranger buddy of mine that we used to work out together. He's about a step faster than me on the run. I was about, maybe 10 pounds stronger in the weight room. And I'm benching one day, and there's a Marine colonel there, and he's like, "Hey, Genghis," he goes, "Are you applying for this SAW?" And I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about, sir?" So he tells me, I said, "Sir, I'm barely making it through Naval War College because I just spent 3.5 years in the infantry battalion. I couldn't write. My language skills were terrible. I was a knuckle dragger." And he basically said, "Hey, Genghis, if you don't apply for it, you're just, making somebody else's chances better to get in there. So don't sell yourself short. Apply for SAW." So I said, "Okay, I'll apply." I throw in an application, and I think there's about 18 of us at the Naval War College, Marines, and I was the only one selected. And the main reason was, now there's something happening in the background in that time frame. If you know, the Goldwater-Nichols Act in 1986 was out, and we're about 1995, 96 time frame, so it's been a decade. And one of the precepts of the Goldwater-Nichols Act was that for an officer to be selected for senior rank, generals, you had to be joint designated. Right, so being on the joint staffs became your fast track to becoming a general officer. If you don't have that joint designation, you ain't getting promoted. So everybody wanted to go on the joint staff. So when I went out for my interviews, they asked me, "Genghis, why do you want to go to SAW?" I said, "Sir, the way I look at it, the reason I want to go to SAW, it's my quickest way back to getting back to the operating forces as a planner." And in my mind, I'm thinking I'll get back down to MEF, get down to division, and all that stuff. And they were shocked. They said, "But everybody else wants to go on the joint staff. Why do you want to? Why don't you want to do that?" I said, "Sir, I can't talk about anybody else. Some of them wanted to be generals' aides and all that." I said, "I just want to get back to the fleet." So that's my motivation. Yeah. Anyway, so I get to SAW, and SAW was good. Spent a year reading books, writing papers, talking tactics, rubbing your chin, coup de oui, and esoteric thoughts and all this stuff. But it was good. I enjoyed it. And from SAW, I didn't get orders to the MEF. They sent me to the MACTAF staff training program. Now here's the blessing in disguise, And so I became an instructor at MACTAF staff training program, a very, very competitive, professional, hardworking environment. And our, several directors we had there, but the most renowned one, you probably know him, Colonel Dobson, Robert Dobson. I think he was in 2-8 with you, right?
He was, and Bob was a great company commander, and he was also a Left-Witch guy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, I've been around Left-Witch guys. So, and I'll tell you what, he, for the first 2 years, I just stayed in the shadows, right? I'm just learning. It's just, fire hose coming at me. I'm just doing my job instructor. So one day he calls me and he goes, "Hey, Genghis, get in here." He goes, I want you to write this Marine Corps planning process publication. And I was like, "Sir, you got the wrong guy. I can't. This is way above me." He goes, "No, you're the right guy." He goes, "You got 3 months, get it done." And they give you a team, right? Team of writers and all that stuff. And so, and we got it done. And basically, We got it published, and my biggest claim to fame there is, if you remember the old FMs, they had this blank SMEAC format in the back. They never told you how a mission statement looked like, what a CONOPS looked like, what a fire support plan.
Yeah.
In the Marine Corps planning process, I made sure that we had detailed operations order with all the full annexes, right? So it really helped the planners. So that book gets, that doctrinal publication comes out. Then he calls me back in. He goes, now you're going to work on Marine Corps operations. And I'm like, sir, you got to be shitting me. I mean, come on. He goes, no, you'll get it done. You got 6 months. And this was like work from scratch, right? So, and basically, I dug up an old Army manual from the 1930s, FM1 or whatever the number was. I forget the number. Because in my mind, tactics hadn't really changed, right? I mean, a flank attack is a freaking flank attack. An envelopment is an envelopment, a single, double envelopment, penetration, infiltration, frontal attack. So these things were all pretty simple. So I took the Army's tactics, I took our amphibious warfare doctrine, retitled it Expeditionary Operations, took our aviation side of the house and our logistics, put it all together, and we came up with Marine Corps operations. And I'll tell you what, that thing breezed through the approval process, got approved by General Bedard. He was PPNO at the time. And the Marine Corps was ecstatic. Here we had a planning publication and we had an operation publication, right? And so it was really, really interesting for the Marine Corps. And by the same token, I was also teaching, as I mentioned. So I was teaching all the command and staff colleges, the War College, going to every MEF on every coast, Okinawa, and also teaching general officers warfighting program. So I had a big spread across the Marine Corps, knew everybody and all that stuff, right? Working with OPTs and all that. So it was really good. And while I got, so my time is up at MSTP and I get command selected for an infantry battalion. Now, keep in mind, at the time, I think there's like 8 infantry battalions would open up in the Marine Corps every year, but it was delayed by a year. So you have to kind of, sit in the bullpen for a year. And I got orders to 2nd Marine Division as G3 plans. So I go down to 2nd Marine Division, G3 plans. And then basically 9/11 happens. And I get called down to where you live, down to Tampa, down to CENTCOM, because I'm also a foreign area officer. So while all this is going on for Coalition of Special Warfare, I'd go down, to Afghanistan and Pakistan on the border areas for counter-drug type, not operations, but coordination and all that, make sure that the Pakistanis had all the resources that they needed to be able to interdict these drugs coming out of Afghanistan, those type of missions. So then, so I go down to CENTCOM, I start the planning effort, and basically I got fired from there, believe it or not, first time, by a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant General Rifle DeLong. And the reason he had a call sign Rifle was he's an aviator, a helicopter pilot, because he actually shot a Marine and killed a Marine in Vietnam. Evidently, this Marine went berserk, and he was the officer of the day and told the Marine to put the weapon down. The Marine didn't. He pulled out his .45 and shot him. So he got the word Rifle DeLong, right? And so he was the deputy SINC underneath General Franks, and I'm briefing the initial plan to him, this consul of generals, in this big conference room, and the brief's supposed to take 45 minutes. And we're 2.5 hours into it. And I basically told him, I said, listen, sir, we're going to, these guys are not the Mujahideens. They're Taliban. They're scholars, right? Religious scholars. And we're going to, but in the process of beating them, if we lose Pakistan, we're going to be in deep shit. So he's like, what are you talking about? So I said, well, these jihadis, you got to remember, I know their mindset. And they also have strategic weapons. Pakistan's got nuclear weapons. So if the Pakistani government falls, as nuclear weapons go in the wrong hands, this problem just amplifies, right? So he's like, you're talking Armageddon, So I said, and I was being a bit flippant because 2.5 hours into the brief, I was leaning on a podium, and and I basically said, your words, not mine, General. And he went berserk on me. He threw me out. He said, get me some actual planners in here, some Jedi Knights, Sam's graduate. Little did he know that I wrote the damn pub on it. I went to SAW and all that stuff. So anyway, so I leave. I go down to my planning cell. I'm packing up my shoebox to leave, go back to Lejeune. I'm thinking, I got an infantry battalion. I'm good. I'll just go back. My 1-star comes on. He's like, "Hey, Genghis, where are you going?" So I said, "Sir, I'm going back to Lejeune." So he's like, "Why?" So I said, "He fired me." He says, "He didn't fire you. He just got overwhelmed. He wants to talk to you." So I go to see him, and I'm thinking he's going to chew my ass again, right? He just mumbles. He's like, "Hey, get over there." And I'm like, "Sir, to do what?" And he's like, "I don't know. Just go on over there and just be my eyes and ears." I said, "Roger that, sir." So I fly to. So that was my first really tour in Pakistan, Afghanistan. A lot of high-level coordination with the Pakistani military. I also did some, special missions, and like opening the embassy in Kabul, and then went out with some ODAs and even our Force Recon folks down in the Helmand province. We did some missions there. And then basically I came back to 2nd Marine Division after that, and then was sent down to be the XO of 6th Marines. I did that for about a year and a half, worked for a kick-ass guy, Colonel David Garza, good man. And then I got sent down to 1-6. And we'll get into that 1-6 and your other questions. And then from 1-6 went deployed to Afghanistan. The battalion was wildly successful, fighting at some of the highest altitudes in the mountains over there. And then in September of 2004, we returned back to Camp Lejeune, and I got called in one day by Colonel McKenzie, and due to bogus allegations to cover his own ass, I was relieved of command. And we'll get, if you really want to get into that, what the burden of command is all about, we can talk about it. And then I eventually retired. And then during my last out call with my CG, the division commander, because I was part of a MU, the MU belonged to the MEF, but I was sent back to the division. And he said, "Hey, Genghis, you'll get over this. Come to Iraq with us. I'll get you command there." And I said, "Sir, I'm done. I do not want to fight for this gun club anymore. It's not the Marine Corps I joined. And let me tell you something else. You keep promoting this guy." I said, "One day he's going to make a big mess." And unfortunately, I wasn't wrong. Fast forward 17 years later, then Colonel McKenzie becomes General McKenzie, CENTCOM, and was responsible for the Kabul withdrawal. So unfortunately, I wish I was wrong. I wish that didn't happen, but it did, right? So that in a nutshell is my background story. And we can go deeper into any part of it that you'd like.
Fascinating story. Thanks for sharing that. By the way, my last duty station was Quantico. I went from PBS and on the staff to commander staff. And commander staff, I saw the tea leaves, what was happening with the Marine Corps. I'm like, I'm out. But I was at the school, so I owed 2 years. So I did my final 2 years at Coalition Special Warfare.
Right.
So I was right there, and it was kind of new back then. And so it was a great job. I was one of the few guys, one of a few Marine officers, and we were essentially liaison officers and points of contact with the letter agencies and the special mission units, and you know what I'm talking about. And it was fascinating. So I got a really good look at some things that most Marines never peek at, and I was all eyes and ears, learning and listening and all that. And so it was very impressive. So, and relative to your relief and all that, I think it merits probably a separate episode, Asad, if you're willing.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Because I know enough about it. And for the audience, we're here to pass on combat lessons and things like that. But this sad debacle, this tragedy that was foisted upon you, contains a lot of lessons too. Yeah. And unfortunately, almost all bad lessons, for what can happen to a soldier or a Marine or any combatant when the command decides to put that guy in the crosshairs.
Right.
And in that environment, it doesn't matter how much mitigating evidence you have. You could be charged with something you didn't do, as in your case. And the decision's been made, we're going to nail this guy's hide to the barn wall. It's going to happen. and you're aware, we've talked about it in the past, your episode has happened several times before you and several times after you, service-wide, with fairly senior officers getting crucified and fighting the good fight, and only after years of fighting get exonerated, like, oh, sorry. What do you mean sorry? You've ruined my career, you dragged my family through, I've gone into debt getting civilian attorneys and all of that. So I can get all wound up at this, and you showed me the investigation and all that. So I think, we're here to share a lot of positive things with the audience, but I will tell you, warriors that are watching this and future warriors, you need to be aware that these things go on, because not everybody wearing a warrior's uniform is in fact a warrior. Many of them, especially in the upper ranks, are administrators, and they are careerists, and they are not only not warriors, I found they are absolutely offended and feel inadequate in the presence of warriors. And if you're telling, if you think, young fellas out there watching, that in Assad's case, a colonel or a general officer could be intimidated and feel unequal and uneasy and inadequate in the face of a real warrior lieutenant colonel whose battalion's kicking ass, I'm here to tell you, because I faced that to a minor degree as a young lieutenant, wearing a couple of medals that most people didn't have at that time and all that. And the pressure's there. So I guess what I'm saying is, to be a good combat leader, Asad, I think you not only have to master the battlefield, be competent, but you have to be competent in your environment. Right. And as you know better than me, my friend, you're out there hooking and jabbing, you're killing bad guys who are trying to kill you. And not everybody in a support role is supporting you. They're looking out for their own agenda. Like, how can I get through this without getting in any trouble and all of that? That's their number one agenda. Right. So I'm already going on a tangent. We better stop, or we'll do another episode like we did when you let me rant on yours. So that's for another time. But let's start with some of the questions I sent you so you could prep for it. If somebody met you, and I mean this with all respect, Asad, because you're not going to toot your own horn, but if you went to Lejeune or Pendleton and you bumped into somebody in the PX or the snack bar or something, and you say, yeah, I'm retired, man, I'm Asad Khan, they're like, oh, I've heard about you. And they have heard about you. And if they ask, hey, sir, what's your philosophy on combat leadership? I heard your podcast with Etor. I watched your Sentinel podcast. If you had to boil it down, because I got to get back to my unit, what's your cliff notes? What is your philosophy of combat leadership?
Yeah, I think, it's really simple, because combat leadership really begins back at the home base, right? And you have to prepare for combat. And the way you prepare for combat is train, and then train some more. So you never want to deploy to combat thinking, I wish I had done this, I wish I had done that. And you never want to do that, because then you're leaving your Marines exposed. And to me, that's criminal, right? It's unconscionable for somebody to do that. And the next one I would say is lead from the front. And I'll tell you what, the Marines expect their leaders to be at the point of friction, failure, and transition. And I can talk about all these, right? So there's always these points on the battlefield where friction is going to happen, and you always need some sort of leader there, somebody in charge at that point of friction, right, where things may go wrong, a river crossing, for example. And I can send you a picture. We were doing a river crossing in Afghanistan, and I'm there with a pick, digging in a farmer's field, because I was at the point of friction. And if we hadn't gone over this berm, the entire force would have been stopped, and we could have been, ambushed or what have you, because the enemy knew we were doing a river crossing. And so I knew that, and I got to the other side really quick because you got to expand your beachhead, and so the point of friction, failure, transition, you got to identify those and make sure there's leaders present there to make decisions. Don't leave it up to your young Marines to make those decisions. That's your responsibility and your leadership team's responsibility. And then my commander's intent was really 3 words, Mike. I know, and I've written a lot of commander's intent being at MSTP and whatnot. And also I was on the editorial board of the Marine Corps Gazette, so I used to read all this stuff. And a lot of officers would write their commander's intent for publication, right? The young lance corporal can't read, a Marine Corps Gazette article and remember the commander's intent. I didn't remember it. So mine was 3 words: find, fix, and finish. That was it. And I explained to the Marines, we're going to find the enemy through reconnaissance and our Afghan militia. Okay, we're going to fix them through aviation, and then we're going to finish them through maneuver, right? So when we're in the find phase, they know the Afghan militia is in front of us, right? And we've got our reconnaissance assets, aircraft looking for them and all that stuff. But as soon as we started calling in the aviation, close air support, they knew we're in the fix phase. Automatically, they're seeing the aircrafts coming in, gun runs, A-10s, Apaches, Harriers, and we even had B-1s, right? And then they're waiting for the finish phase because they know either I'm going to envelop right, envelop left, or I'm going to say do a frontal attack. Let's go. So everybody's getting ready, right? They're just waiting on the word. So it just became a battle drill for us with the commander's intent, so it worked. And then finally, I think my command philosophy was bring your Marines home. There is nothing more important, because the parents of America entrust their sons and daughters to you, to your leadership, to your command, and you have an obligation to bring them home. Now, I get it. I get the fact that, we're going to take casualties, and I'm not, and we took casualties, but you have an obligation to make sure everybody comes home. And that's your number one obligation, your force protection, right? Without force protection, you'll never accomplish the mission. And so I think that's, in a nutshell, is probably my philosophy: train, lead from the front, identify the points of friction, failure, transition, find, fix, finish, and bring your Marines home. That's it.
I love it. Well, I love that. And, I'm a Beirut Marine, and I wasn't there for the tragic BLT bombing. I got there just afterward because we got diverted to do Grenada. But I can tell you, I'm going to do an episode or several on this. You talk about force protection and all that. We had 241 Marines, sailors, and a few soldiers murdered in their sleep by a truck bomb that should have never gotten through to that building because the senior Marines on the ground, the MU commander, Garrity, Colonel Garrity, and the BLT commander, Gerlach, by their own admission, did not enact adequate force protection measures because they were afraid of Marines having negligent discharges and killing a Lebanese civilian. So the use of car bombs, vehicle bombs, was not unprecedented. The American embassy had gotten blown up several months earlier in May. The BLT happened in October of '83. The American embassy got leveled in April. Prior to that, the Iraqi embassy got leveled, and these terrorists were using these explosives. Iran was at the heart of all of them, and they failed to protect their men. And that guy rode in Assad, obviously a Muslim fanatic, and he had a death shroud on, and he rolled in, and as the Marines were trying to load their weapon, he looked at them and waved, smiled at them, drove into the building. There's a carport underneath it, and explosives, most of the blast goes up. So he got under the building, and the carport, boom, and a 4-story building got reduced to about a story and a half of rubble, Marines trapped, Marines blown up into the trees, hanging there by their feet, getting caught in the wise of brain. It was just sad and all that. So that's a very sore spot to me. And I'm going on a little bit of a diatribe here, but audience, if you're listening to this, you young fellows, or even you current guys that are listening to this, to sharpen up your game, he is absolutely right. Asad is right. Your first duty is to protect your soldiers, your Marines, your airmen. First duty, because you can't kick anybody's ass and kill bad guys until you first prevent them from doing that to you, at least doing everything you can to prevent that. Right. There's never going to be a 100% solution. You got to be aggressive. So on to the next question, Asad. You know, you've been a role model and a mentor to so many. The obvious question is, were there any mentors, role models, or influencers in your past that helped you become a better combat leader?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts, right? So to this question. And most of them were Vietnam veterans. The first one was Colonel Vargas. And, if you read about his Medal of Honor, how he earned that Medal of Honor, it's a compelling story, right? And but not only that, as a Medal of Honor recipient, he could have just rested on his laurels, right? But he's always out and about with 7th Marines, always checking about the Marines. And he had a system where they would call down, randomly just pick a platoon, 2nd platoon, Bravo 1-2. You got half an hour, come to the regimental CP for regimental commander's inspection. Think about that. So every platoon was always ready, right? And this was in the mid-'80s. There's some issues going on in the Marine Corps, as you well know. And it just upped our game a little bit, right? And we focused on that. So my way of keeping my Marines out of trouble was always train, keep them in the field, right? Which not only improved their proficiency, but kept them out of trouble. The DUIs, the fights out in town and all that stuff. So, and he really upped my leadership game. Then there's obviously Colonel Ripley, John Ripley. And the main reason for him is because I served with his son in 1-2. So I really always admired him. In fact, when I went to Vietnam, I also went to the bridge at Dong Ha to pay respect, to Colonel Ripley. And people can read that book. Well, little did I know, the bridge isn't there anymore. It's like a 4-lane highway going across, it's hilarious. So I'm standing there looking for the bridge. And all of a sudden it dawns on me, this is like 1960s and I'm in 2023, so 63 years later, there ain't no bridge. Anyway, I took the picture of the river and I, sent it to his son. The next would be Major General T.S. Jones. He was a regimental commander at 2nd Marines. And I'll tell you what, he was a Royal Marine Commando. Served with them. Really hard man. Not a big man, but a tough guy, right? Yeah. And I really admired him. And then obviously my 1st Battalion Commander, Colonel Simone, again, not a big guy, but a tough guy, right? Really good leader. And he was also my regimental commander down at the drill field. And, I never covered up any drill instructor's mistakes, but, obviously we made mistakes. And I would just go and brief him on it and tell him, hey, this is how we're going to solve it. And he trusted me. So that kind of paid off, and some of the drill instructors' careers got, saved. And the last one I would say, and there's many of them, but another one is Sergeant Major Charlie Constance. He recently passed away, but a big all-Marine wrestler, was my company first sergeant. He had paws, bare paws, and just a good guy. He just taught me about toughness and how to lead Marines, and, just a good person. But the role models, I would say, in terms of combat leaders, would be 3 uncles of mine, and most Marines aren't familiar with them. But the first one is Brigadier General Asad Khan. He was a recipient of the Military Cross in Burma, right? A tough guy, and also established the current line of control in northern Pakistan. And I won't go into all his history, but really somebody that inspired me to join the military. And then his next brother was Air Marshal Asad Khan. the first commander-in-chief of the Pakistani Air Force, really a top-notch officer and one of the fathers of the country, right? I mean, just people really well respected. And the next one would be Major General Mitta, Abu Bakr Mitta, right? He started the Pakistani SSG, Special Services Group. And a lot of people don't know about Pakistan military, but it's actually pretty shit hot. There's a thing called the Cambrian Patrols in the UK, where 70-some countries send their infantry guys to do infantry tactics competition, and Pakistan typically wins it because their soldiers are so freaking hard, and that's because of the altitude, right? And they generally do very well. I think they've won it like 4 years in a row just recently, and so I would say that. And then I've got the traditional people that I really admire and some of the tactics I use. General U.S. Grant, I absolutely love him, right? And the Wilderness Campaign, where he just kept flanking, right? Kept flanking and never let go of the enemy. So, that's the tactics I used in Afghanistan. We never let go of the enemy. Once we made contact, I stayed on them for 17 days, kept fighting it out, right? And we can go into that later on. The next one is Major General Terry Allen, not a renowned figure in U.S. history, but a phenomenal soldier's general, and who really mastered the night attacks, right? Absolutely phenomenal guy. He knew the element of surprise, and I learned a lot from him. And then about leadership was Brigadier General Roosevelt, who landed with the assault waves on D-Day with the soldiers. Think about this, a brigadier general, the nephew of the President of the United States. He leaves all that trappings behind and says, I'm going in there with my soldiers with the assault waves. A few days later, he died in Normandy because of a heart attack. And then there's Major General Cota, also landed with a second assault wave. And he saw all these soldiers pinned down on Omaha Beach. I'm getting chills in my back right now talking about this. And he told the soldiers, he said, we can either die on the beaches or we can die inland. Rangers lead the way. And he started marching. Everybody got up and started following him in, right? I mean, those are the leaders that we need and we demand. That's officership. That's combat leadership. General Shoup was a colonel on Tarawa, wounded. The assault waves, wounded, right? Landed with his Marines. Was awarded the Medal of Honor. Was a commandant of the Marine Corps. But what happened to these people? Where did they go? And now what we do is we idolize people on the joint staffs. These puff daddies that I call them, muffin heads, right? Gummy bears. I've seen them in action. They're worthless. They sit on fobs and hide. And they protect themselves with PSDs. I didn't have a PSD, and people got offended that I wasn't walking around with the squad of Marines. I didn't need them. I can take care of myself. My lance corporal doesn't have a PSD. So why the hell do I rate one? My PSD was with the infantry company that I was with. That's my PSD. And that's all these guys that I'm talking about taught me that stuff. What combat leadership's all about, what courage is all about. And courage is not something that you just pull out of a can of tomato soup, right? It just doesn't come out of a can. You got to develop it. You got to exercise it. You got to be physically and mentally tough. And courage is just like a father taking his son first time, to the county fair, and wants his son to go on the roller coaster, and the son's like, no, daddy, and what does the father do? He demonstrates courage. He gets on the roller coaster. So the son develops some confidence, and then they both go together. And that's exactly the responsibility that combat leaders have. And you have to demonstrate that courage. You have to expose yourself to fire. You have to expose yourself to the enemy. And the first time, I'll tell you this much, first time we got ambushed, this is my second tour with the battalion, I remember this enemy shooting at us, and all the Marines turned around to look back for instructions. And you remember what we all taught in TBS, hand and arm signals, squad online, all this bullshit, V, remember that? It's all bullshit. It's nonsense, because what happens is people have to turn around and look for that hand and arm signal. And in the chaos of battle, and that audio that you have is so fantastic, because in that you don't have time to look for hand and arm signals. So when I saw this the first time, I got all my unit leaders together. I said, we got this wrong, gentlemen. I expect you to be in front of your formations, and the Marines will follow you. They will duplicate whatever the hell you're doing. And a couple of guys looked at me and said, sir, but what happens if we get shot? I said, so be it. That's what leading from the front is. And I'll tell you what, I'll be in front of you. In my mind, I'm thinking of Brigadier General Roosevelt. He was in front of his soldiers. And that's what these people inspired me, to learn. And I'll tell you what, once 1-6 figured that shit out, and we had leaders at the point of point of failure, friction, and transition, and leading from the front, there was nothing on this planet that could have stopped, a Marine force of, I had 1,200 Marines, but in combat, because Mackenzie and his FOB sucked up 400 of them, so I had roughly 800, right? And we can go into that. But nothing could stop us, nothing on this planet. They were like locusts coming through. And that's the type of, tenacity and leadership we got to develop. And our forefathers did it. We've just forgotten it. And that's the sad part about this whole thing.
I love it. You made a lot of great points there, Asad. And one of the things you alluded to, I want to ask you specifically, there's different philosophies on just general military leadership, garrison leadership, and combat leadership. Some people say no difference. Other people say vastly different. What's your philosophy? Are there differences? Are there synergies between, because let's face it, even with all of your combat experience and all other Marines, if you stay in for 20 years or more, the vast majority of your time will be in peacetime, garrison, training for war, preferably. But, very few guys. Now, there were a lot of enlisted Marines during the long wars that they did a 6-year enlistment, and 4.5 of them were on combat tours. Well, those days are over now, And so the fact is, even in today's Marine Corps, combat leadership is very rare. Combat experience is very rare. I mean, you have first sergeants now with no combat experience and lieutenant colonels with no combat experience. So they are leading, and I think many of them are leading well. Is what they're doing at Camp Lejeune and Camp Pendleton and Okinawa, does it apply to combat leadership? Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I love it. And you're going to get me going. I get fired up real quick, right? So as you well know, combat, as we talked about, as you well know, and you've led, Marines in combat, there's different in Beirut, different in Desert Storm, right? But both required you to expose yourself to the same risks as your Marines, right? I mean, that's hands down. That's combat leadership, right? And the Marines gravitate towards that. If they see, the old man, the company commander, the battalion commander exposes themselves to the same risks, they will fight for you, and they're willing to die for you, right? But general military leadership requires us to set the example and don't ask something of your Marines that you're not willing to do yourself, right? Which is basically training, participate in the training. So the two are kind of linked. And the problem happens, in my mind, is this staff mindset that we have, right? We've become risk averse in training. And what I'm talking about is it ought to be a test for every rifle company to be able to do a live fire night attack. And there's a reason for that, because it builds confidence. If you can do a live fire night attack, the Marines are confident in each other's abilities, right? They're confident in the leadership to be able to execute and command and control this night attack, the signal plan and all that stuff, right? And then I would require every battalion to be able to do that. Now we talk about it, well, we do it at CACs. Well, no shit you do it at CACs, but how many cadre do you have out there, right? So every battalion evolution, there's probably, 12 to 15 cadre over there organizing and making sure safety's going on. Then they got sidewinders and all that, coyotes and sidewinders, right, to make sure nobody gets killed. But the problem is that we're spoon-feeding the battalions. So when that battalion gets to actual combat and has to replicate all that stuff without the cadre, without the coyotes, without the sidewinders, guess what happens? You get fratricide issue. Right, and a great example is right at the same time when I was commanding in Afghanistan, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines was the same time period was in Iraq, and they called a mortar fire mission. They didn't do all the deconfliction properly, and the battalion commander walks in the FSC and says, "Hey, mission approved." So what does the staff do? Hey, the old man approved it. Fire the mission. Right? So they don't go through all the process. And then what happens with the first mortar round, it lands on Echo Company. 2 Marines, 1 Terp killed, 12 wounded. Right? There's no coyote, no backstop, there's no sidewinder, and this battalion commander who retires as a lieutenant general, one of the smart guys in the Marine Corps, the Marine Corps covers it up for 3 years. Until Mary Tillman finds out about it, and she goes in front of Congress, and then General Magnus, Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, had to go in front of Congress and apologize for doing this. They lied to the Marines. And these generals were Mattis and Conway. I mean, you got to be shitting me. Tulin, at least, was a colonel at the time, regimental commander, and he said the 3 of them, battalion commander, FSC, and the lieutenant, should be held accountable. But Mattis disagreed. That's not leadership, and I don't give a shit what anybody says about Mattis. I lost complete respect for the guy, and I'll say it openly, publicly. And Mattis and I used to be friends, very close friends. Okay? But when you start covering up deaths of Marines, that's unconscionable. That's not what leaders do. And, stuff is going to happen in combat. You make a mistake, I made a mistake, and people will understand that, right? And the problem is that same risk-averse mindset I just talked about is in peacetime Marine Corps also, in training. So you've got units right now that are not doing fire and maneuver, to get the check in the box, they go to the range and they get in the prone, they fire off some rounds, they come back, right? Static firing, that's static training. And I'll tell you what, as I said at the outset, train, and train some more. Never, when you're getting on that plane or getting off that boat, you never want to say, I wish I had done X, Y, and Z, because then you've failed your Marines. So it takes a different mindset in combat, one that wants to expose himself to fire, to inspire the Marines, and it takes a different mindset in Camp Lejeune, to be able to train Marines. I think you have to be a fantastic trainer, first of all. You have to know how to train Marines to get them ready for combat, and then you got to transition to be a combat leader. I think that's so important. So that a battalion commander, a company commander has to play multiple roles. How to train Marines? I don't think Marine officers know how to train Marines. They're taught by their company commander when they're lieutenants, right? So if it's a good company commander, like yourself, you'll teach them. But if it's a shitty company commander, that's risk averse. And my first company commander in Bravo 1-2 was a shitty company commander. We go to the field and we go to sleep until he got relieved because he wasn't doing his job. The next one was pretty good. So he taught us a little bit, right? So you're a product of your upbringing. So there's no school in the Marine Corps how to train Marines for combat. We just kind of just leave it up to, hey, this guy's been through IOC, he knows how to do it. Bullshit. I'm not buying that.
I agree with that. I'm going to throw some observations based upon observations of active duty guys. When I graduated IOC, there were none of these. I mean, the training that's available today, Asad, is just, I salivate. I wish it was available to my Marines and I way back then. But when we were in TBS and IOC, it was drilled into our heads. Training is on you. Yeah. Training, Lieutenant, is on you. You and your platoon sergeant. You got to figure out the training schedule. You're responsible for that. And then the captain and whatever and all of that. And so we grew up. For example, when I reported into 2A, I had a company commander named Mike Dick, and he was a really good one. And we would go to the field as Fox 28, we leave like Monday afternoon, and we would come back Thursday afternoon.
Right.
And he would say, look, we're going out in the field Monday afternoon. From Monday afternoon to noon on Wednesday, they're yours. Platoon level stuff. Bring me your training schedule. So I and my platoon sergeant squad leaders, we had to figure out, fire team squad, what are we going to do with this time? And then we would rendezvous at 12 noon at a certain grid square, and we would now start doing company level stuff, prep for a night attack and stuff like that. Where I'm going with this is, and I was, that was what happened back then. We had no money. There was no place where you marched your Marines, let somebody else train them. That did not exist. It just did not exist. Then the long wars kicked off post 9/11, and you were there. And the good news is all sorts of money and resources started flowing. So some fantastic training venues and programs and methods came in, but a lot of the instruction was, in fact, most of it was outsourced to contractors, retired Marines. It was quality training, but you've got maybe a couple of generations, 10-year tranches of Marines or 5-year tranches of Marines whose view during those wars was, we're going to deploy, and before we do that, we're going into training. So we got to go here, turn them over to these instructors. They're going to train them in that. Then we're going to the MOUT facility, this, and then we're doing that. And they were participants at best, observers at worst to how their Marines were getting trained. Fast forward, now the wars are ending, the money's drying up, and I have personally talked to general officers and said, now the money was gone, those programs were gone, and now we had to have company commanders, battalion S3s, platoon commanders, staff NCOs train the Marines, and through no fault of their own, they hadn't been trained to do that. They didn't have that experience. They just didn't know how to do it. And it was a big problem, and hopefully they've gotten a grip on it. So there's lessons in what you're saying. I think there's lessons in the observations. And by the way, everything I just said came from active duty general officers, colonels, and senior staff NCOs. I knew a sergeant major, Purple Heart, wounded as a grunt, big fighter. And I told him what that general officer said. He goes, you are absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Mike. I have platoon sergeants that don't know what to do. They've been through fantastic training themselves, but they don't know if the boot lieutenant comes in and says, well, Staff Sergeant, what are we going to do for these 3 days? I need your help. He's as clueless as the new kid from Quantico. Clueless. And it's not supposed to be that way. And this is all about combat leadership, combat survival that we're talking about. This is why we're doing this podcast. So I think what you're saying and what I'm saying to the audience is, young fellas out there, you are responsible for the training of your Marines. Nobody else. You. Hopefully you've got people surrounding you that are going to bring resources to bear for you.
Right.
But 1st Platoon Fox Company was mine as 2nd Lieutenant Etor. And what I was responsible for everything they did not do, and were capable of doing. And so shame on me if we couldn't move tactically and cross danger areas and things like that. And we drilled those relentlessly. And like I said, I was nothing special. We were all doing it back then. And I hope that kind of self-sufficient, self-reliant training ability in officers, junior officers, and staff NCOs has returned. I want to say this, Asad, you were a superb combat leader. You've observed a lot of combat leaders in your own battalion and adjacent units. You had some unique experiences. Are there, based upon your experience and observations and study, are there any traits, habits, personalities, leadership styles, etc., that most of the very effective combat leaders share in common?
Yeah, I think one word: tenacity. That's it, tenacity. And what I mean by tenacity is tenacity for standards, tenacity for discipline, tenacity, focus on the enemy, that you never let go once you make contact until you bring it to fruition, right? Or conclusion. So when you, and I can go into this later on, we'll talk about it. So I think tenacity is the most important thing. And I'll give you an example later on when you ask for an example, but tenacity is the most important. I mean, we can sit there and talk about, the principles of war, J.J. did tie buckle, and all that stuff. But you can sum it up, in my view, tenacity. That's it. And the one that really boils down to force of will, right? So whoever's got the stronger force of will is typically going to prevail. And it's a commander's job to really imbue tenacity into all his Marines and all his subordinate leadership. And it's tough to do because somebody's having a bad day. Even men have hormonal cycles, believe it or not. They do. And you got to recognize that, right? And that's why a commander's got to walk around and inspire Marines. It's very important that they want to follow you through the gates of hell. And trust me, I took them to the gates of hell. We didn't go through them, but I took them there. Each Marine lost 25, 30 pounds, and every one of them writes to me, and they remember that part of their lives, right? And they thank me for bringing them home alive, And I tell them, I say, you don't need to thank me. We brought each other home alive. You brought me home alive too, so I should be thanking you. And I think that's so important. But that mindset, you got to be like a. You ever heard of a Congo dog? Congo, it's a Turkish shepherd dog, right? You should look it up. It's massive. It's bigger than you are. Congo. It's incredible. And Congo is a tenacious dog. They will hunt down a wolf pack with their smell, and they put these big collars on them so the wolves can't bite their neck with nails sticking out of them. And they'll go all the way to the wolves' caves and kill every one of the wolves once these dogs are unleashed. And when the dogs of war are unleashed, that's our job. I mean, this is not, it's really that simple. It's to kill or be killed, so there's nothing fancy about any of this. And you know this. And we got to be able to communicate to the Lance Corporal level so they understand it. So I'm not going to stand there and talk about coup d'etat and all this happy horse shit. I'm going to tell them, hey, we're crossing line of departure. Here's the plan. Find, fix, finish. And I'll see you at the other side. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. I'll see you on the other side. Yeah. And I used to get up every morning, in the morning when I rallied the Marines, and I tell them, I said, Marines, today's not a good day to die. It's just to get them fired up. They go, hoorah, sir, and all that stuff. One day I woke up and it was just a beautiful day out. And we've been fighting for, days on end. And I said, Marines, today's a good day to die. It was a nice, cool day, cool breeze going. And the Marines went just like, holy shit, what is this guy talking about? I just turned, the rhythm on them. And then finally, I realized what was going on. The way my inflection and everything was having an effect on these guys. So I had to change my tone again, And I said, it's a good day to die for the enemy. And we're going to kill that son of a bitch today, And they understand that language. You know what I'm saying? I
love it.
Yeah. So, that's the way you got to do it, man. Marines rally to that, And you've been a drill instructor. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I would take a company of recruits any day.
Oh, yeah.
Any day. We can teach them how to fight. Yeah. But that discipline, that esprit de corps that they have, you can't replicate that shit. And it's our job to do it. And it's not only battalion commanders, but the entire staff and senior officer chain has to buy into it. So I think that's very important. Tenacity.
Yeah, I love that. And relative to your speech, I gotta believe you've seen it. Have you seen the video? Somebody was filming it on their iPhone. I believe it was in Afghanistan, but I'm not sure, of a Marine company commander named Cohen. Yeah. Giving a pre-assault speech to his Marines, and he was talking. I'm going to see if I can get him on, play that video.
He's an incredible officer. I served with his dad. Colonel Bob Cole.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I watched that video, And I was ready to go into the attack.
Damn right.
You know what I mean? I mean, the way he said it, though, about how he loved Marines and we're getting ready to go, and some of us might not come back, but we're going to go.
Yeah.
We are going to bring fire to the enemy and all that.
Yes.
I mean, that video is out there and should serve as that is a combat leader. And he's getting his guys in the right mentality, like you were, like, hey, this ain't going to be easy, but we're going to go kill these bastards. We are going to do it, you know? Yep. And so I love what you say. And yes, of course, in any aspect of leadership, as goes the leader, so goes the unit, always, without every time. And so if you've got a lion in front of a formation, you're probably going to have a pack of lions. If you have a timid sheep, then everybody's going to be risk averse. For example, there is a high-ranking Marine general officer still serving that when he was a battalion commander, I don't know if it was Iraq or Afghanistan, but when he was a battalion commander, anytime a Marine shot his weapon, he brought the lawyers in and they did a formal investigation. Every single time. Now, what does that do? I see your reaction, Asad. What does that do? That makes every Marine really gun-shy and hesitating. And you know, sometimes, many times, that hesitation is what kills you. You ain't got time to think, but I know I'm going to get investigated. And he was the only battalion commander in the regiment to do that, and his boss let him do it. But I mean, but think about what I'm saying here. This is not good. And this is an officer with that attitude that rose to multi-stars. So was he aggressive before, or was he conflict averse and cover your ass and all that? And so we could do a whole nother episode on the, I understand there's a place for lawyers, JAG officers and all that, but I think from me watching and talking to people, commanders have copped out, and they won't make a decision without the JAG telling them it's a legit target or a legit fire mission. And it adds a layer of bureaucracy and lawyers wanting to be important. Anyway, I don't agree with it whatsoever. I mean, rightfully so. When I was in, I don't think we had no influence of lawyers unless somebody was in trouble. You know, and they helped the Marine out, or in some cases, rightfully so, prosecuted him and all that. So we got a lot to talk about here. On the flip side of that previous question, you know, traits and habits of good leaders, tenacity. What about the ineffective ones and even the bad ones? Because let's face it, for those warriors out there, if you don't know this yet, even a vaunted organization like the Marine Corps, which is full of good leaders, if not great leaders, we have some mediocre ones, and we also have some abject, terrible ones, criminally negligent and toxic leaders. So any common denominators in the bad ones, Asad?
Yeah, I mean, they're lazy, right? I mean, right off the bat, they're lazy and they're not physically fit. If you're not physically fit, you're not mentally tough, in my opinion, right? And so you know, physical fitness builds mental toughness, and it's like a ladder you climb every day, right? You get physically, you get a little bit tougher, and that helps your mental toughness. So that's the first part of it. So that's the first trait that you notice in them. They're soft people, and you can pick them a mile away. And they're not willing to expose themselves to the enemy. They're cowards. It's really that simple. And the second reason they don't want to expose themselves is because they don't want anything to happen that's going to come back on them. So they distance themselves, right, from the action. And you know, so and I can go into some greater detail and the things that I've seen where they fly in for a couple of hours, get the, you know, with the PAO there taking pictures, and they fly out, right? because they don't want to be around there in case a war crime happens. When you got 200 to 300 Afghan militia, illiterate bandits, that are stealing everything, they can, have no discipline, and they're working for $5 a day. Try managing them. JJ did tie buckle doesn't work with these guys. It's not trust leadership. It's leadership based on fear. They have to fear you, and then they listen to you, right? That's the discipline you impose on them. But these guys don't want to come around because they don't want the Afghan militia doing something. Well, you know what, Stud? Why did you give them to me if you couldn't handle them?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really that simple, right? You gave me this turd that I had to deal with, yeah, because you couldn't handle it, right? So, and then you kept your distance, right? And thankfully, and a couple of times we had incidents where they wanted to execute some prisoners. Luckily, my Marines, because they knew where I stood on this shit, came running to me, and I went down there, and these, about 6 to 8 guys kneeling, hands tied behind their back, and my Afghan militia leader, looks at me and goes, "Colonel, this doesn't concern you." I said, "Stop. What do you mean it doesn't concern me? I'm paying you. It does concern me. And let me tell you something. You shoot them, I'm going to shoot you. Then your militia is going to shoot me, and then my Marines are going to shoot them. And we're going to have a big mess on our hands. So why don't you let me have them?" Right? And he got pissed off because every time we give you prisoners, they come back. And I said, "I'll promise you these guys won't come back. I'll send them up to Bagram." Right? And there's respect. And he knew I meant it. That if he shot those prisoners, I was going to shoot him. Okay, but nobody else is willing to do that. That's my point. They don't even know how to go about it, right? Yeah. So what happens with these lazy cowards is they shelter themselves. They sit in these fobs in their air-conditioned COCs, pretending they're fighting wars, but they're not. It's theater, right? And, and I can tell them a mile away. They walk around with PSC. We used to have a force recon platoon guarding the frickin' MU commander. Imagine that in a safe area. What a waste of assets. The force recon guys hated it, right? And a commander, let me tell you something. Just to show that I wasn't scared of anybody around there, I would walk around without a flak jacket. Couple of reasons. One, I'm not scared. Two, my Afghans didn't have that, gear, right? And they try to ding me of that. How mythology and all this shit starts up. That this guy is so crazy that he's walking around without a flak jacket and helmet on. Well, you know what? My Afghans don't have it, and I owe them some leadership too.
Yeah.
So generally, the bad leaders always shy away from where they're supposed to be. The assault wave, they're never there. They're sitting back in, in England, right? And that's the sad part. They're not on Tarawa. They weren't on Guadalcanal like Vandegrift was, right? And so that's and they're there. They're staff officers. And I did an episode on Sentinel that I talk about this, right? And I did a study of general officers, how much troop time the World War II general officers had, about between 40 and 50%. And today it's between 20 and 25% troop time, right? So how do we fudge these numbers? We bullshit ourselves. We claim that a MU commander is actually troop time. It's not. He's got a headquarters of about 250 to 300 people. He's a headquarters commander. That's all he is, right? So it's not really troop time. Troops, being a Marcent is not troop time. You're a headquarters commander, right? So, but if you clear all that shit out, the last time this guy really commanded was at a battalion level, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. He has no idea what Marines are capable of. So I think it's very important for these staff officers, and I'll talk about this at the end, that we need a separate track for staff officers, that they focus on planning and doctrine, right? And then have combat officers that focus on training, on discipline, and on leading Marines in combat. And then you have a technical track where they focus on pilots, comm, cyber, maintenance and all that stuff. So we got to break it down. And that's going to make us a better military, because right now we're not. And that's the truth.
I love what you say, and I want to summarize this again, because you're saying a lot, and for the audience out there, young warriors, these people exist, and many of you listening and watching these videos and soundtracks are idealistic. You're reading, you're only exposed to the great ones. But these people abound in today's military. They've always been there, but they are exponentially present in today's military. So the lesson is they are there, and they are a factor. Obviously, don't become one of those. Watch yourself so that if you have a company commander, battalion commander, squadron commander, whatever, and he's one of these guys that removes himself from the fray, even in peacetime, controversial, fight out in town, and he just doesn't want to deal with it, lets the XO handle it and all of that. You can't fix him, but by God, don't follow that example. So lesson one, they are there, and you're going to have to deal with them, and you're going to have to mitigate and shield your Marines to the extent you can. Lesson two, don't become one of those. But lesson three, don't judge a book by its cover. You may see a guy, and I'll use today's example. You may see your SAF NCOs or your senior officer, battalion commander, now it's, regimental commander, general officers packed, ribbons aplenty. Yeah. And you think, this guy's a real warrior. And you know what? He might have been. He actually might have been 15 or 20 years ago. But he has allowed himself to become a bureaucrat. Yep. Even worse, a self-promoting, self-defending, ass-covering bureaucrat. So I learned this. It always amazed me to see legitimate Vietnam heroes, legitimate, big-time awards. You read the citation, there was no bullshit. These guys were good. Yeah. And then you see them as lieutenant colonels, colonels, and generals in peacetime, and they have no balls. Yep. They have no spine. They've become what the Marine Corps rewards. And the military today does not generally actively develop, promote, and reward Asad Khans. They promote the bureaucrats that specialize and realize very easily, just don't make waves, go along with it. So I'll get off my soapbox. Another question, Asad. People are listening. They're looking at you, and they're like, I've read about this guy, and I mean, he's impressive. I mean, I can never be like him. And I want to ask you this. There ain't many Asad Khans running around, but they're there. And there are people that aren't even wearing a uniform right now, that they're going to go out and do things in combat one day, and you're going to be an old-timer and say, man, I'd be an ammo humper for that guy. Look at this guy. So the real question is, for those out there that maybe have a little bit of self-doubt, maybe imposter syndrome, they're already wearing the uniform, they're in a role, they're a platoon commander or staff sergeant or platoon sergeant. If the balloon goes up and they got to go, can I really do this? The question is, can the average student of the profession become an effective, not a great combat leader, can they at least become an effective combat leader?
Yeah, I think it takes, and it's not a switch, right? You just can't turn it on and off. It takes years of preparation. So I can just talk about my experience. It took me about 18 years of preparation as I went through my origin story. And it goes all the way back to the boarding school, playing sports, getting into fights and all that stuff. So it's a mindset, right? And then when you come in the Marine Corps, you have an obligation to your Marines. I used to walk through the barracks on the weekends. And just to show and demonstrate, and I genuinely cared about my Marines to make sure they were okay on the weekends, right? And I walk in the room, and I think it was allowed a 6-pack, and I'd see a 12-pack in there, right? And I'd notice I corner my eye. I'd keep quiet about it, and as I'm leaving, I'd say, "Okay, gents, make sure you stay out of trouble." Now, these Marines are thinking, "Holy shit, we got to go see the battalion commander Monday morning because I got a 12-pack." I never told anybody. That's just a secret between me and them. There's no incident. It's fine, right? So you got to make some allowances, right? So the Marines you have to develop that bond and trust with your Marines. I think that's so important. But the issue is it's not a switch, right? So you prepare for many years, and it's just not reading books. It's about actually going out there and training with your Marines and seeing what their capabilities are and where they're falling short. You keep working on it. I'll give you an example. When I was took over the battalion, every one of our SAW gunners failed the ORE, Operational Readiness Evaluation. And I'm standing there scratching my head. How can that be? And come to find out, every new PFC that joined the battalion was handed the SAW, the most important weapon system in the fire team in the squad, and they're handed it to the youngest Marine. No wonder they can't qualify. So I said, stop this shit. We reassigned those weapons, trained everybody, and everybody qualified, right? So you got to have a standard. Everybody's got to meet it. I think that's so damn important. Now, in terms of how are you going to do in combat, nobody knows. I'll tell you, nobody knows, right? Because, when I went into, my first tour in Afghanistan, working with all these high-speed, low-drag type units and stuff, it was different because each one of us was really responsible for a team of highly selected, highly trained individuals, right? But when you've got a rifle company, you've got a battalion, 800 some people and a couple hundred Afghan militia and all that. It's a different mindset, right? It's a different type of people. So, and I'll tell you this much, the second time, I had some mixed emotions about it, right? And to come to terms with it, my final decision was, I'm willing to die here. That was it. I'm willing to die. I'm willing to die for my Marines. That's it. I'd come to terms with that, and I will do so to bring them home alive. If it takes me to die in combat, fine, I will do it. Right? So that's a commitment I made to my Marines. I didn't tell anybody about it. I just kept quiet in my mind. But as time went on, so the first firefight that I told you about, all the Marines turned around and looked back because we trained them wrong. Our fault. We fixed it, right? But as time went on, we had, the battle rhythm that I mentioned about find, fix, and finish. Everybody became comfortable, right? And many times we'd get ambushed. I remember one time, and I had a fantastic, staff and officers. And I'll tell you, it's not just Khan. It's just a team that we developed with training that were so damn good. And my S2, Captain Bullard, was fantastic. He predicted every ambush based on the IPP that he did. He would look at the orchards. He would look at the streams because he knew when these guys would break contact, they go to the orchards to get some fruit, and then they go to the stream to get some water. And we turn those into engagement areas with reconnaissance on there. And as soon as these guys are running, there's a great clip. These three guys run through an orchard, and a Cobra comes in and just takes them out, right? He was waiting there for him. Right? So we're always a step ahead of the enemy, and my staff was a step ahead of me. They knew what the next decision point was, what Khan needed to think through, and they had options for me, right? So there's a battle rhythm that we had. And once that battle rhythm got going, nobody could keep up with us. We're just operating at a different pace. And I think it was fantastic. And what that did was it gave me confidence and gave the Marines confidence that these guys know what the hell they're doing. We're not just, having them run around aimlessly. There's a method to our madness, right? And I think that's really, really important. And those are things you can work in peacetime back at Camp Lejeune. But once you deploy, it's a battle rhythm, right? It's like it's game time. You've played football. You don't have time to devise plays. You execute what you've worked on. And I think that's so damn important. So I really... the key is you got to develop trust in each other. And I'm going back to that comment I made about night attacks. Night attacks are the fundamental training evolution for Marines to build trust in each other and in the chain of command, because they know the chain of command ain't going to get them killed. And you don't have sidewinders, you don't have coyotes executing the night attack for you. You're responsible for the safety, for the command and signal, and the fire support plan. And you got to execute it. And I think that is so damn important, the night attack, right? Yeah. And I'll tell you something else, if I can just do a segue, because you brought something up and I want to mention that.
Of course.
The responsibility of the commander to train his Marines, right? Now, let's hearken back to 2020 February. when President Trump signed an agreement with the Taliban in Qatar that we're going to exit Afghanistan in May of 2021. So we've got about 14 months, right? Then the President Biden decided that we're going to do it in September. So now we've got about a year and a half, 18 months, right? And everybody knows this is happening. Everybody knows it, right? But guess what? The platoons, and I talked to some company commanders, they're training on doing what? Night attacks. They're training on, that's the wrong thing to train on. So nobody had the gumption, the intellect to say, okay, we're going to take 2nd Marines. These are the guys that we've set aside that they're going to go into Afghanistan for the withdrawal, and they're going to train on crowd control. They're going to train on NEO, and those are the skill sets that we need, right? Nobody thought of that. So what happened was when all chaos broke out, they're just throwing Marines into the fray. They weren't trained for it. And what kind of horse shit is that? And then you got McKenzie. An article just came out 2 days ago that by an investigator from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he wrote about it. Okay, they had to order McKenzie. Here's the frickin' combatant commander. That he's got this major operations going. He's sitting where you are in Tampa, and then finally. The Chairman Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, had to call him and say, hey, the Secretary of Defense wants you to go forward to Qatar to negotiate with the Afghans. This is 16 August. And he's hemming and hawing about it, right? So he goes to Qatar 15 August, the day before Bagram has fallen. Bagram is gone, right? He goes to Qatar, and Mullah Badr is negotiating with the Taliban, and McKenzie's the wrong guy to send over there. Now, I'm really going off on a tangent, but we need to cover this, okay? Mullah Omar, just like we have dossiers on everybody, right? They have dossiers on him. His call sign, or what they named him, his nickname by the Taliban, or the Afghans, was Chuggle Rye, plump lamb. Okay, so we send the plump lamb to negotiate with these Taliban, right? The guys that have been fighting us for decades, right? And Mullah Badr basically says, fine. He goes, McKenzie tells him, hey, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we don't want you coming into Kabul. If you do, we're going to really use some force on you that you'll regret. You think they're scared of us by force? We've been bombing the shit out of them for the last 20 years. We dropped more bombs on them than we've done in World War II and Vietnam combined. They ain't scared of that. It's the wrong tactic to use, right? Probably the right tactic would have been had a cup of chai or something with the guy. And so Mullah Badr says, we're already in Kabul. Because they send their infiltrators first, right? So the infiltrators are already in Kabul because we'd established a perimeter around Kabul about 30 kilometers out on these geographical features that Austin and Milley and McKenzie came up with, and they'd already breached it. So that shit is gone, right? And then so Mullah Badr goes, okay, I'll tell you what, why don't you take over security of Kabul and we'll just stay out? How's that? And McKenzie just fumbles and he's like, oh, no, I can't because I don't have the force, blah, 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 and all this stuff, right? And he backs out of it. Basically tells the Taliban, you can go into Kabul and take it over, right? Big mistake, number one. Okay, if Khan was sitting there, you know what I would have told Mullah Badr? I would have said, hey, how about, since you just took over Bagram, how about you let me use Bagram as an evacuation point and take your fighters and give us safe passage to the border of Pakistan, right? All of a sudden, you got options, right? You're not just focused on the Kabul airport, force protection issue, where your force is exposed. So we don't have that thinking. We don't have the thinking of these people. When the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff has to tell you, hey, go forward, something's wrong. He's the wrong guy, right? If you have to tell him.
Critically wrong. Well, I think he's, and for those that don't know, I mean, you need to look it up. There's no escaping the fact. General McKenzie, I'll just go ahead and say it. Mike Etor's opinion is based on everything I have observed. I'm sure he's a nice man, clearly a smart guy. He wrote in the Gazette and stuff like that for years. He's got all of the 50-pound head boxes checked, so to speak. But I personally think that he was perhaps the weakest and morally bereft general officer in modern Marine Corps history. The guy knew what needed to be done, and he sat on his hands and didn't do it. And that's on him. And because of the system the way it is, I know it flames you, Asad. It pisses me off. Not only did he not get held accountable, he prospered. He prospered. He kept getting promoted. And now he's out there on the speaking circuit writing a book, and and basically he's using what I call the Nuremberg defense. I was just following orders.
Yeah,
I was ordered. And it's like, well, you got an order and you're supposed to follow it. You're duty bound to follow it unless you know it is not a good order. It's a lawful order, but it is a fatally flawed order. And that's when you say, you got to find another general.
Yep.
I'm not doing it. And that is so far gone, not only from his mentality, but the military in general. Rare is the officer, rare is the leader that will say, I am not mutinying. There is no insurrection here. I cannot morally do this. I cannot cross that red line right there. I'm not doing it. You're going to have to get somebody else. And I know I'm going to pay for it, and they can't do it, Asad. They just can't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's where a commander has to have moral courage, and these people haven't developed that moral courage over time, right? And it's not a flip, it's not a switch that you just flip it on and off. And the other thing is they distance themselves from where the action is, right? Where things can go wrong. And so that's why, Milley had to tell him, hey, get your ass over there. That's where the action is. And in my mind, in your mind, if you're a commander, you would be there. I'd be in Kabul, right? This is a major operation, but he wasn't. So these are the type of leaders, and they're setting the wrong example. And unless we hold them accountable, we're going to repeat the incidents, right? And a good example is that in Vietnam happened, fall of Saigon, right? All that shit happened in Vietnam. Westmoreland got promoted up, right? He got promoted up. Nobody's held accountable in Vietnam, so we didn't learn the lessons. Then Afghanistan 2.0 or Vietnam 2.0 happens in Afghanistan. Nobody's held accountable. The question we got to ask is, where's Afghanistan 3.0 is going to happen? Where's that going to happen? And losing our sons and daughters is unacceptable. I have no problem dying for my country. I got zero issue with that. I'm willing to do it anytime, any moment, right? The problem I got is don't waste my freaking life, and don't waste the life of my son, because my son also fought in Afghanistan. Don't waste our lives, okay? Do it with purpose, do it with intent, and do it intentionally. It's not a byproduct of, your career. That's the point I'm making. And I think that's so important. And that's every troop wants that. No troop wants his life wasted. Every troop wants to know that his commander generally gives a shit about him, just like he does of his own children. I think that's important right there.
Well, thank you, my friend. I love that. And again, to summarize to the young folks out there, like, what did he just say? What has he been saying? You probably came on this episode thinking that Asad was going to talk purely about combat tactics and that the enemy did this, we did this. And he's talked about some of that, and we'll talk about more in subsequent episodes. But he's also talking about combat leadership is your ability to understand that this chessboard, so to speak, is not just with players, it's politics. These kind of things that Asad is talking about have infected the institution. And it is a burden on you, combat leaders, that you're going to have to face and plan for and not be shocked at its presence. The job is already hard enough. There's the fog of war. The things are going to, no battle survives the first shot, the old saying. Well, if the fog of war is legit, and it is, all of this stuff are like those fog machines you see on Halloween producing fog. We inflict fog upon ourselves. That's right, and that's what Asad is talking about, and it makes things difficult, if not impossible, to do sometimes. And the people that pay the price are always the frontline fighters. Always. always, always. Listen, Asad, we're running short, but I want to go through one more section of questions, and they're all related. The questions that I asked of myself, I had many, but these are the big ones that I asked of myself before I was an enlisted Marine, and if I ever, Vietnam vets, World War II vets, Korea vets all around me, am I going to be able to do this, And forget being a combat leader. At that time, I wasn't focused on it. Am I going in combat? And here's the questions. Will I be too afraid to perform well under fire? Will I remember what I am supposed to do? Am I going to be able to handle, see my friends killed and maimed and wounded? And we just assume we can do it, but am I really going to be able to pull the trigger and kill another human being in front of me? And those questions, I think, are at all ranks, all levels. I think most people pre-combat ask them these questions in one form or fashion, and I'd like to get your take on these questions. What would you say to a young guy if he asked you these questions?
Yeah, the answer is yes, absolutely, because I trained you. When you get the order to shoot and kill, that's what you're going to do, because I trained you, and it's muscle memory. So you have to develop muscle memory, right? And you don't have time to think. That audio right in the beginning of your podcast, that audio says it all. You don't have time to rationalize and think and go through, a scholastic method of analysis to figure out, is this the right decision or not? If the enemy's shooting at you, you shoot back to kill the son of a bitch. I mean, it's really that simple. And, my ROE was very simple, okay? Let them shoot first. Let them shoot first. They're shitty marksmen. They're terrible. The AK sucks as a weapon system. And I proved it to them. In the middle of a firefight, I'd get up and I'd walk to a tree, apricot tree, and start grabbing apricots and see rounds plinking around me. Couple of reasons, right? And everybody thought, oh, he's being brave. No, I'm not. Because I want to know where the son of a bitch is shooting from, right? And while my air officers got, the Cobras looking through the flare, where the muzzle flashes in this mountain, because big rocks and stuff, and we figured it out where it was, and we took them out, right? Dumb guy. So my point being is, we're a better shot. We're better trained. We've got optics, right? And we'll be okay. So let them shoot first and see what happens. Go for it. I dare you. So that's the first part. Now, you're going to be scared, and it's good to be scared, right? I was scared many times. And I'll tell you this one time, we did this, we got ambushed, and I remember throwing up, because I used to drive myself, right? Because I was short on Marines, I knew where I was going, and all of a sudden they ambushed us. I remember throwing up the window of my Humvee, I throw it up, and I'm yelling at my machine gunner on my vehicle, Corporal Blanco. I'm like, shoot, God damn it, and he's like, my gun is jammed, and so all this is going on, and all of a sudden a PKM opens up, and I was like, holy shit, we're going to die here in my mind. That's the only thought I have. So I jump out of the vehicle, I grab my M4, and you assault. Well, exactly what we've been taught, muscle memory. As I'm assaulting, there's a squad of Marines sitting behind a big boulder. Boulder probably about 20 foot by 12 foot high, a squad sitting there. And here comes a battalion commander. And I see the squad leader, and the same thing, that audio, right? And the legend has it, I said, MF, you better get your ass moving. I'm going to shoot you in the back of the head. They were frozen. And they saw the battalion commander, and they're like, holy shit. And we assaulted. We assaulted up this damn mountain. We get to the top. I didn't even grab my flak jacket. And I'm borrowing magazines from my radio operator, Corporal Guttrell. And we get to the military crest. I'm like, Guttrell, throw me a grenade. And he's like, for what, sir? I was like, I'll throw it on the other side of the crest in case the enemy's on the other side. So, and he's like, what if the MF rolls back on us, sir? I was like, good point, cover me. So anyway, we cleared, nobody's up there. And I'm sitting there sharing a canteen of water with Guttrell, and another firefight starts on another hilltop, mountain on the other side. So I'm like, shit. I make my way down, and all of a sudden these RPGs open up, kaboom, 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 and Guttrell starts running. And I said, Guttrell, I'm not running. We're walking. Legend has it, how things get inflated. This guy's so crazy that he's not even scared of RPGs. That's not why I did it. I was just bone tired, and I was done. I was tapped out from assaulting up that mountain, and I was ready. If they want to freaking kill me at that point, go for it. I'm done. I'm tapped out. I'm dead serious, man. But the legend is, but it inspired the Marines to see that this guy is walking through, this RPG blast and all that shit. I was just freaking done. I was tapped out. So my point being is, you're going to be scared, and it's okay to be scared, but rely on your muscle memory, rely on each other. And that's what the Marine Corps is all about. It's teamwork, and you get, and as long as you do that, and over time, as more of these events happen, it just becomes that much easier, right? And towards the end, on day 100 of our combat operations, we were ready to take it on with anybody, right? Because we trusted each other, and that's the whole thing. You develop battle drills and all that stuff. So training is very, very important. I think training is everything for combat. It's just like a boxer, right? If you don't train for your match, you're going to get your ass kicked. And the one that trains the hardest and has got that tenacity is going to win.
Yeah, I agree, my friend. Thank you. Well, listen, our time is up, but I wanted to alert the audience. I mentioned it up front, Asad. You are a very well-known figure in the Marine community. And a lot of people trust your words of wisdom and all of that, and you're prolific on your Sentinel podcast. So tell the audience, what are you currently involved with, and where are you living, what do you do, and how can they find your podcast? I know you're about to publish a book. Where's that book going to be published, and how do they contact you if they want to?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I live in an airplane. I love to travel. I think that's just one of the gifts that, the good Lord has given me. I've got the means and the resources and the time to travel, so I really enjoy that. I see the world so I think that, to me, it's just critical, right? This week, I'm again going off into northern Pakistan and Himalayas. I like to ride motorcycles up there and all that stuff. I've traveled to over 100 some countries. In fact, I just stopped counting them now. But nonetheless, the point I want to make is, after I was relieved, I kept quiet for 20 years. I didn't say a word to anybody except some very close friends. And the reason I stayed quiet was because, the things I had to say were too blunt for young Marines to be able to handle. And if they'd heard my words, they would have lost trust and confidence in the senior leadership. So there's wars going on. So I just kept my mouth shut, right? Until the Kabul withdrawal happened. And going back to what I told my CG, the same guy who's responsible, that's when I started speaking out. And that's where you and I met on LinkedIn. I started putting some posts on LinkedIn, and it resonated with people. So they wanted to know more. So then I started thinking, you know what? I'll start a YouTube channel. So I started putting some videos up, and all of a sudden that thing kind of took off, right? And we've got when we talk about a lot of this stuff about accountability, about especially for senior military leaders, about not going on foreign misadventures. I think that's so important. We don't raise our son and daughters to go die for other countries. We raise them for America, to prosper in America. And last but not least, we give solutions like the 3-track system that I talked about. So I'm really involved with LinkedIn. I'm really involved with the YouTube. And then everybody asked me, said, hey, why don't you write a book? Well, I wrote a book in 2005, 2006, but I put it in a drawer, right? Because it's just therapeutic for me to get all this shit off my chest. But the key thing was I had everything documented. I've got first source documentation. Here's documentation, notes. I've got journals, everything from actual combat that I keep. And the reason being is because memory fades, and then you've always got some schmuck who's going to challenge you, and my response is bring it on. Let's talk about it. So the book is it's coming out probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's in formatting right now. It's called Betrayal of Command, My Journey in Afghanistan, which talks about my first tour, in Afghanistan, and then obviously my second tour all the way up to the relief. Then I give some solutions at the end. How can we improve? So I think it'll be a good read. It's going to tell my side of the story, which needs to be told. And so I'm kind of excited about that. If anybody wants to contact me, certainly through Sentinel 360, one word, on YouTube or through LinkedIn. Just type in my name, Asad Khan, and I'm on LinkedIn. And I'd be glad to help out any veteran, any active duty, any young man or woman that wants to go in the military and they want my opinion on it. I'm telling you this, I'm pretty damn blunt. I have not changed one bit since I was a young Marine, and I don't intend to change. I will always speak from the heart. That doesn't mean I'm always right, but you'll always get exactly what I'm thinking. And there's no fluff behind it. So that in a nutshell is me, Mike.
Well, thank you, my friend. I believe people are going to contact you, and we'll bring you back and do an episode completely on the book. You know what I mean? Because I'm already kind of intellectually salivating. I know what's coming, and I want to read it, and I know I'll read it page to page. So I can't thank you enough for your time and willingness to share your insights, my friend. This is a valuable episode. It's going to be very, very popular, and we've already alluded to it. We're going to do parts 2, parts 3, parts however many to get through, our outline here. But you're dropping gold nuggets on these folks, and I truly appreciate it. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think it's a great outline and the way you presented it, because it allows the person to really frame your thoughts and your ideas. And I've got some really good ideas on training and whatnot. I was just looking at the outline, and we need to come back and talk about it. Once we get through the intangibles of combat, let's talk about how to train a unit for combat and things of that nature. And I think that's very important. Because in my mind, and I'll tell you some of the best compliments I've gotten, I'm going to put that in my book too. The Marines just thanked me while they're training. They hated it. I hated it because I was training with them, right? It was tough, but it paid off. It paid off in spades, and now they thank me for it, right? And that's the way it should be, because I'm like the coach, right? The Rocky Balboa movie, The Coach. He's a prick, and I don't claim to be a nice guy. I'm not. I'm an honest person, and I'll take my shirt off and give it to anybody. That's not the point. The point being is, if something needs to be done, we're going to do it to task, and I'll be there with you every step of the way. So I think that's so damn important for a leader to be able to do. And I think we collectively, we need to up our game in the military and as officers, because ultimately it's our responsibility. And we've let the troops down, and we let the 13 families down in Kabul, which was essentially 5 days ago that incident happened. The bombing did on 26 August, and we can't keep repeating this stuff, because the American people will lose confidence in us. And they give us an awesome responsibility. They give us $1 trillion a year. And we need to do better. And I confidently believe that people like yourselves and others that generally believe in this stuff, Jeff Kenny and a whole bunch of other guys, we can do better. And, that's the goal that we all have. It's our country, and this is the only country we got. And we want our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren to prosper. And that's what I'm all about.
Yeah, I agree. You are all about it, and I cherish the friendship and the comradeship, my friend. So I would just say, stand by. We'll do part 2 as soon as we can arrange it and all of that. So thank you so much, Asad, and for the audience listening and watching. We are rounds complete for this episode of the Combat Leadership Podcast. As always, leaders, go forth and lead well.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at combatleadership.com. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient philosopher Plato. Only the dead have seen the end of war.